Before man walked the earth, it slept for centuries. It is evil. It is real. It is awakening. So begins John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness. Oh, 1987, when the secrets kept by the church were merely 2,000-year-old relics containing the spawn of Satan. Let's set the table. In the basement of a Los Angeles church, the Brotherhood of Sleep, which is an ancient subsect of the Catholic Church, has guarded a cylindrical relic that contains a glowing green swirling liquid for thousands of years. When the last member of the Brotherhood dies, a curious priest, a professor of quantum physics, and a team of research assistants decide to pull an all-nighter in the church to try and discover the origin of the mysterious object. After setting up shop and wheeling in their 1987-era high-tech computers, they begin to make some sense of the canister with the help of a 2,000-year-old manuscript. It would appear that the canister of swirling dish soap contains the spawn of Satan, or the son of Satan, or essence of Satan. Either way, the priest, played by Donald Pleasance, recognizes it as the ultimate evil. And let's face it, he would know. But hey, no big deal, as the artifact's elaborate mechanical seal is securely locked from the inside. So maybe a big deal. Now, while all this is going on inside, a group of zombified homeless people begin to surround the church with seemingly sinister intent. From here on out, we have fluid swapping, both traditional and very much not. We have possessions, impregnations, self-mutilations, nightmare communications, and invertebrate infestations. Lastly, a very cool bike trick. Here are 5 wicked things awakened in John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness. So one of my favorite things about Prince of Darkness is the set design, and in particular the church basement. When we first see the set, there's crucifixes and other religious objects adorning the plaster walls in the basement. Candles throw just enough light around the room, and a series of pedestals and columns lead the way towards the canister of swirling green liquid. A green that, when I see it in an 80s movie, I can't help but think of it as Ghostbusters slime green. The canister itself, the design of it, feels both ancient and futuristic all at the same time. Once the group wheels in their computers and measuring devices and a bunch of spotlights, which, for the sake of atmosphere, don't light the room any better than the candles, the theme of supernatural versus science that Prince of Darkness is sort of centered around is echoed visually. While some action does take place in this set, it's far too little for me. I personally wish they would have spent more time here instead of in constructed studio sets and inside the church. I'd have to believe that the only reason they did is so they could be isolating characters and having them get picked off. Another theme in Prince of Darkness is that of the weak-minded being more susceptible to being possessed and controlled by the evil entity than the strong-minded. The homeless street people, for example, are very quickly taken over and made to operate under sort of a hive mind by the evil entity, whereas it takes more direct contact, like a giant torrent of spit, to take over one of the fancy-ass scientists or research students. The only character who seems to outwardly struggle with his possession is Calder, played by Jesse L. Ferguson. While everyone else goes into sort of a trance-like state when they're taken over, you can really see the pain and anguish in Calder's face the whole time he's possessed. Calder is almost laughing and crying in equal measures, and it's hard to tell where one stops and one begins. When he approaches his unpossessed teammates and he's singing Amazing Grace, it's hard to tell if it's genuinely coming from Calder or from the satanic force inside him now. Is he singing it as a way of protecting his soul? Or is the evil within him singing it as a way of mocking his belief in God? The same goes for when he slits his own throat with a piece of broken wood. Is it Calder attempting to, no pun intended, dispossess the devil of his body? Or is it the devil himself looking to shock and disgust the onlookers? We can only guess at what's behind Calder's motive in his last few seconds and who's really running the show. But Ferguson's, without a doubt, is the standout performance of Prince of Darkness. Only in the 80s, when slasher films called into play all manner of gardening tools and power tools to dispatch their victims, would a pair of gardening shears lead to one of the most memorable kills of the era. The setup for the kill begins when Wyndham, one of the researchers, decides to leave the church, and he's momentarily distracted as thousands of beetles begin humping his leg in the parking lot. While trying to make sense of the insect infatuation, and in a very Argento or Giallo-esque shot, he's set upon by a bag lady who stabs him to death with the aforementioned gardening shears. And for the record, she does not make short work of it. It is a brutal, brutal kill. A short while later, we see Wyndham return, his face carved like a Christmas ham, and he delivers, for my money, one of the creepiest lines of dialogue in any horror film from the 80s.
Hello? I've got a message for you, and you're not going to like it. Pray for death.
You're not going to like it. That line chills me every time, and I think it's because of the mundaneness of the warning. There's no need to go into verbose wordplay when simple and direct will do. Maybe it's the fact that these beetles have now infested and reanimated Wyndham's corpse and are acting as his voice box to deliver the chittering omen. Once the message is delivered, we see the beetles emerge from Wyndham's corpse. His head topples over, essentially ending the puppet show for now. So in addition to being raised on horror movies, I was and remain a hard rock music fan and metalhead. So the fact that Alice Cooper is in Prince of Darkness is certainly worth talking about. His character, the leader of the street zombies, does quite a bit with very limited screen time. Certainly enough to warrant his image being used on multiple releases of VHS, DVD, and Blu-ray covers. Now in 1987, I was 13 years old, and I certainly wasn't using the term meta back then. But the scene where Alice Cooper's street zombie kills the character of Etchinson is just about as meta as it gets. Now amongst all the straitjackets and guillotines, one of the other stage tricks that Alice Cooper used to use back in the day and continues to use to this day is one where it appears that he's impaling someone on stage with a mic stand. So Carpenter had seen Alice use this trick before, and when he had signed on to be in Prince of Darkness, Carpenter and Alice worked together to modify it, and instead of a mic stand, it would be a bike. More meta still, when Etchinson is leaving the church, he puts a Walkman on and begins listening to the song Prince of Darkness by Alice Cooper, just as he's about to be killed by Alice Cooper in the movie Prince of Darkness. Now, if you've never heard this song before, please do not think you're missing out. It's nowhere near on par with He's Back, the Man Behind the Mask, the song Alice contributed to Friday the 13th, Part 6. To my ears, it's just your standard mid-80s heavy metal track that somehow manages to rip off about 2 or 3 Ozzy Osbourne tracks from the same era. And the lyrics? Well, the best thing I can say about them is they are extremely literal when describing the events of Prince of Darkness.
He spits on life, he spits on God, he spits up death for you and me.
He spits on life, he spits on God, he spits up death for you and me. Poetry. So altogether, as an Alice Cooper and John Carpenter fan, even though it's maybe just a curiosity piece, I love the fact that these two worlds collided in Prince of Darkness. So, shared consciousness is another theme found in Prince of Darkness, and nowhere is it more evident than in the dream that the researchers share whenever they fall asleep. The dream is actually a broadcast from the future, a kind of distress signal to warn anyone in the immediate vicinity that what hangs in the balance is just, merely the apocalypse. The dream is a heavily distorted vision of a cloaked figure in the doorway of the church. And the way Carpenter chose to film this vision was by replaying the footage on television and re-recording it with a handheld video camera. Now that may sound super simplistic, but the effect jars the viewer just as it does the people having the dream in the film. The camera shakes and moves, and we only get a glimpse of who or what is exiting the church. In a way, these shots are almost like a predecessor to the found footage craze kicked off by Blair Witch and perfected in Paranormal Activity. These repeated dream sequences pay off significantly in the final frames of the film when we see that the research team has indeed succeeded in changing the course of fate, but not necessarily for the better. So let's make it a double, shall we? Prince of Darkness would pair quite nicely with a film called Quatermass in the Pit. Quatermass was an acknowledged influence on Carpenter and on Prince of Darkness in particular. Some even go so far as to call Prince of Darkness a palimpsest, which sounds like something you'd have a dermatologist remove, when in fact its actual meaning is something reused or altered but still bearing visible traces of its earlier form. There are multiple similarities between the films. A scientist called upon to explain the origins of a strange object discovered underground? Yes. The object having some connection to an evil alien consciousness? Yes. Myths, legends, and evil itself entering the world through extraterrestrial intervention? Yes. Susceptible humans sharing a collective consciousness? Yes. These are just a few of the similarities to be found in Quatermass, which is a film that also influenced Tobe Hooper's Life Force and is widely acknowledged to be the precursor to Doctor Who. If that weren't enough, Carpenter wrote the screenplay to Prince of Darkness under the pseudonym Martin Quatermass, tipping his hat and recognizing the source of his inspiration on Prince of Darkness. Hot take for Prince of Darkness? This is not John Carpenter's best score. Now, I can extol the virtues of John Carpenter's early scoring work on Assault on Precinct 13, Halloween, and The Fog all day. They are some of the most original and often imitated horror scores out there. However, Prince of Darkness is not that, and is a huge miss for me. One of my own creative creeds or sayings, if you will, is that limitations breed creativity. Early on, when Carpenter was limited to just a handful of analog synths, he was forced to be creative and to get the most out of a very restricted palette of sounds. By the time of Prince of Darkness, Carpenter had access to the same all-in-one synths and ready-made patches that everyone else was using at the time. And the result is too much of the music on Prince of Darkness sounds like too much of the music on film and television in that era already. In a word, it sounds dated and somewhat derivative. A lot of the patches and tonal colors sound like they came from the soundtrack for A Nightmare on Elm Street 1 and 2 and just don't have that distinctive John Carpenter flair to them. A lot of the score sounds like an 80s action movie more than it does a horror movie to me. The team assembly motif in particular sounds like it would be better used underscoring one of those montages where Stallone gets all his gear together and prepares to single-handedly take on a small South American country. One thing of note is that perhaps the theme from The X-Files was greatly influenced by this score. Do you hear it? Do you hear it? I hear it. Do you hear it? Bottom line, just a huge miss for me. So what do you think? Is Prince of Darkness a top-tier John Carpenter score for you? Is Prince of Darkness the top of your John Carpenter list or the bottom of your John Carpenter list? Did I miss touching on your favorite moment in Prince of Darkness? Let me know in the comment section. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss another hot take or some wicked things about one of your favorite horror movies. Forward and onward.